I'm Rachel, HR director. Tired of the subtle comments, the interruptions in meetings, the way they dismiss our ideas? Time to level the playing field once and for all. First week on the job, overhear two guys from engineering talking near the coffee machine. She's pretty hot for a developer, one says about our new female programmer. Lel. Disgusting. Make mental note. These attitudes run deep here. Clearly, this place needs serious intervention. Start implementing new policies immediately. Create comprehensive reporting system for workplace misconduct. Any complaint from a woman triggers immediate formal investigation. No more of this boys will be boys nonsense. Zero tolerance means zero tolerance. Bring in mandatory sensitivity training for all male employees. Watch them squirm as we go through scenarios about appropriate workplace behavior. Some of them actually have the audacity to ask, what if the accusation is false? Explain that believing women is fundamental. False accusations are statistically negligible. Their discomfort just proves how necessary this is. Within first month, 3 separate complaints come through the system. David from marketing made a comment about a female coworker's outfit. Immediately launch full investigation, notify his manager, document everything. He claims he was just complimenting her new jacket, but intent doesn't matter. Impact is what counts. Second complaint about Stephen from accounting, allegedly stood too close to a female colleague during a presentation. Again, full investigation protocol. Stephen seems genuinely confused, says he always stands there during presentations. Classic gaslighting behavior, making the victim question their own experience. Third one really validates everything I've been saying. Marcus from IT supposedly made inappropriate comments during a team lunch. The complainant felt uncomfortable with jokes he was making. Marcus protests that everyone was laughing, including other women at the table, completely missing the point. Just because others laughed doesn't mean it wasn't harmful. All 3 men get formal reprimands. Word spreads quickly through the office. Good. Maybe now they'll think twice before their next microaggression. Notice some interesting behavioral changes over the following weeks. Men seem more cautious in their interactions. Conversations are shorter, more professional. Exactly what we wanted, a respectful workplace environment. Couple months later, attending a project planning meeting, notice something odd. When I walk into the conference room, instead of the usual casual pre-meeting chatter, everyone goes silent. 7 people in the room, 4 men, 3 women, including myself. One of the men immediately pulls out his phone and starts recording just for accurate meeting notes. He explains when someone asks. Whatever. Transparency is good. Means they're taking things seriously now. Few weeks after that, trying to schedule one-on-one meetings with department heads. Need to review performance evaluation procedures. Email Thomas from sales about setting up a meeting. His response is weird. I'd be happy to discuss this. Could we include Jennifer from my team as well? She's familiar with our current processes. Odd, since this is about managerial procedures, not day-to-day operations. But fine, more perspectives can be valuable. Same thing happens when I reach out to Michael in engineering, wants to bring his team lead Sarah to our meeting about budget planning. And when I contact Robert from customer service, insists on including his assistant manager, Lisa. Starting to see a pattern here. Every single man I try to meet with individually wants to include a woman colleague. Initially, think this might be positive. Maybe they're finally recognizing the value of female input, but something feels off about it. Decide to test this theory. Email James from facilities about routine office maintenance budget. Simple administrative matters should be straightforward. His response, absolutely. I'll ask Patricia to join us since she handles vendor communications. There are no vendors involved in this discussion. Now, I'm paying closer attention to office dynamics. Notice men literally never meet with women one-on-one anymore. Anytime a male manager needs to speak with a female subordinate, there's always a third person present. Initially assume this is just better collaborative culture developing. But then I observe something that makes me pause watching Kevin from finance try to give feedback to Amanda, one of his analysts. Instead of just talking to her at her desk like normal, he asks another coworker to witness the conversation. The feedback is completely routine, just clarifying some spreadsheet formatting. Why does this need a witness? Start documenting these patterns more systematically. Every single interaction between male and female employees now includes a third party. Men are bringing recording devices to meetings. Everything gets documented in email follow-ups with multiple people copied. Initially, think this is just good professional practice. Documentation and transparency are important, but the behavior seems almost compulsive. Decide to address this directly. Approach Daniel from operations after noticing he requested a witness for a 5-minute conversation about printer paper ordering. Ask him privately why he felt that was necessary. His response catches me off guard. Rachel, I need to protect myself. Any misunderstanding could destroy my career here. Protect himself from what? It's just a conversation about office supplies. Press him for clarification. He becomes visibly uncomfortable, starts looking around nervously. I can't risk any situation where it's just my word against someone else's. The policies are very clear about how these things get handled. Walk away from that conversation feeling unsettled. What did he mean about policies being clear? We implemented fair protective measures for victims of workplace misconduct. How is that threatening to someone who's not doing anything wrong? Decide to dig deeper into recent workplace dynamics. Pull up records of formal complaints over the past year. 3 complaints total, all resolved through our standard investigation process. Each case was handled professionally and appropriately. But then I start looking at informal feedback from exit interviews. Pattern emerges that I hadn't noticed before. Several male employees mentioned feeling walking on eggshells. Phrases like constant anxiety and afraid to interact naturally keep appearing. This is concerning. Schedule meeting with Linda from HR Analytics to review workplace climate data. Of course, she insists on including Mark from her team as well, even though this is clearly HR to HR discussion. During the meeting, Linda presents some troubling statistics. Workplace satisfaction scores for male employees have dropped significantly. Collaboration metrics show decreased cross-gender interaction. Productivity in mixed-gender teams has actually declined. What do you think is causing these trends? I ask. Linda and Mark exchange glances. Mark speaks up. Rachel, I think the men here are genuinely scared. Scared of what exactly? Scared of being accused of something they didn't do, Linda adds quietly. The investigation process is thorough and public. Even if someone is eventually cleared, everyone knows about it. This doesn't make sense. We created a safe environment for women to report problems. How does that translate to fear for men who aren't doing anything wrong? Ask them to elaborate. Mark explains. When David got investigated for the clothing comment thing, everyone saw him called into meetings with HR, with his manager, with legal. Word spread that he was under investigation for harassment. Even after he was cleared, people still whisper about it. That's just due process, I explain. We have to take every complaint seriously, but the investigation starts immediately. Linda points out there's no preliminary assessment of whether the complaint has merit. Day 1, everyone knows you're being investigated for potential sexual harassment. Still not seeing the problem. Believing women means taking their concerns seriously from the start. Would you rather we dismiss women's complaints without investigation? Another uncomfortable glance between them. Of course not, Mark says carefully. But maybe there's a middle ground, some way to assess complaints more discreetly before launching full investigations. Absolutely not. That's exactly how predators slip through the cracks. Preliminary assessments are just code for protecting men's reputations over women's safety. End the meeting feeling frustrated. They're clearly not understanding the bigger picture here. But over the following days, I can't stop thinking about what they said. Start observing office behavior more carefully. Men really do seem different now. Watch Peter from marketing interact with his female colleagues. Every conversation happens in open areas where others can hear. He keeps his office door open during all meetings. When he needs to discuss something privately, he literally asks someone else to stand nearby. See similar patterns everywhere. Men timing their conversations to happen when others are around. Constant email documentation of even casual interactions. Refusing to take business trips with female colleagues unless multiple people are going. This level of paranoia seems excessive for people who aren't doing anything wrong. Decide to investigate further. Review our complaint resolution process more carefully. Look at the actual language in our policies. The procedures do seem comprehensive. Any complaint triggers immediate formal investigation. The accused person's manager is notified within 24 hours. HR meetings are documented in employee files. Investigation typically takes 2 to 3 weeks minimum. During investigation period, interactions between complainant and accused are restricted. Reading this with fresh eyes, I can see how it might feel overwhelming, but these measures are necessary to protect victims. Decide to get male perspective directly. Approach Alex from product development. He seems level-headed, reasonable. Ask him privately about the office climate changes I've been observing. His response is immediate and visceral. Rachel, do you have any idea what it's like to work under constant threat? Threat? What threat? Every single interaction with a female colleague is a potential career-ending landmine, he continues. One misunderstood comment, one gesture that gets interpreted wrong, one moment where someone feels uncomfortable and suddenly I'm branded as a harasser. Explain that our policies are designed to protect everyone. Protect everyone? He laughs bitterly. Rachel, your policies assume guilt from the moment an accusation is made. There's no protection for the accused. That's not true. We have fair investigation procedures. Fair? Alex shakes his head. Marcus from IT is still getting side eyes 6 months after his investigation. Even though he was cleared, people remember him as that guy who got investigated for harassment. Push back on this. If he was cleared, then his reputation should be fine. You really don't get it, Alex says. In today's environment, being accused is almost as damaging as being guilty. The investigation itself becomes the punishment. This conversation is going nowhere. Alex is clearly exaggerating the situation, but his anxiety seems genuine, even if misplaced. Over the next few weeks, pay closer attention to investigation procedures. Notice that word does spread quickly when someone is under investigation. People talk, speculate, make assumptions. Even when cases are resolved in the accused person's favor, there's lingering awkwardness. Maybe there's some validity to these concerns. But protecting women from harassment has to be the priority. Can't let fear of false accusations prevent us from addressing real problems. Then something happens that shifts my perspective entirely. Receive complaint about Jason from customer service. Allegation is that he made inappropriate comments during a team video call. Follow standard protocol. Immediate investigation. Notify his manager. Schedule interviews. Document everything. But this time, I decide to review the video call recording myself. We record most client-facing meetings for quality assurance. Want to see exactly what happened? Watch the entire 45-minute call. Jason participates normally, professionally, makes several comments about client requirements, asks clarifying questions. At no point does he say anything remotely inappropriate. Confused? I rewatch sections multiple times, check the timestamps from the complaint. The alleged inappropriate comment was supposedly made at 28 minutes into the call. At that timestamp, Jason is discussing technical specifications with the client. Review the complaint details again. Complainant claims Jason made a sexual joke during the call. Specifically alleges he said something about getting her excited, referring to a female colleague. But watching the recording, what he actually said was, "I think this feature will get users excited about the new interface." Completely professional comment about product development. This is clearly a misunderstanding, but our investigation has already been launched. Jason's manager has been notified. He's been called in for HR meetings. Colleagues have seen him going in and out of HR office. Realize this situation perfectly illustrates what Alex was talking about. Even though Jason did absolutely nothing wrong, he's now under investigation for harassment. His reputation is being damaged by a completely false accusation, and our policies provide no mechanism to quickly resolve obvious misunderstandings. Call the complainant for clarification. When I explain what Jason actually said, she immediately apologizes. "Oh my God, I must have misheard. I was multitasking during the call and thought he said something else entirely." Simple mistake, easy to resolve. But the damage is already done. Investigation has been initiated, records created, people notified. Try to close the case quickly and discreetly, but the process doesn't allow for that. have to complete full investigation protocol, even for obviously baseless complaints. Jason spends 2 weeks under investigation for something he never said. Colleagues whisper about why he's having so many HR meetings. Even after he's cleared, some people remember him as the guy who was investigated. This experience forces me to confront uncomfortable truths about our policies. Maybe the system is too rigid, too punitive. Maybe there should be some preliminary assessment before launching full investigations. But every time I consider modifications, I think about all the women who have been dismissed, ignored, gaslit. How many real predators have escaped consequences because initial complaints weren't taken seriously? Struggle with this balance for weeks. Then notice something that really drives the point home. Walking through office late one evening, finishing up quarterly reports. Hear voices from conference room. Peek in and see 4 people, 2 men, 2 women from different departments. They're having what appears to be a routine project meeting. Nothing unusual about it except the time. 7:30 p.m. is odd for a regular team meeting. Decide to ask why they're working so late. Turns out this isn't a project meeting at all. One of the men, Carlos from design, needed to give performance feedback to Emma from his team. The other 2 people are there as witnesses for the conversation. They scheduled the meeting after hours so the witnesses wouldn't have to take time away from their regular work. Carlos is literally paying 2 colleagues overtime to witness a routine performance review because he's too afraid to have a normal one-on-one conversation with his female subordinate. This is insane. Performance reviews are standard managerial responsibilities. Why does he need witnesses for basic job functions? Ask Carlos directly. Rachel, I've seen what happens when it's one person's word against another's. Emma's a great employee, but if she misunderstands something I say about her performance or takes feedback the wrong way, he trails off. But the implication is clear. He's genuinely terrified that normal management duties might be misinterpreted as harassment. Watch Emma during this conversation. She seems just as uncomfortable with the situation as Carlos. Having witnesses for performance feedback makes the whole interaction awkward and formal. This is ridiculous, I tell them. Emma, surely you don't need witnesses for a performance review. Emma looks conflicted. I mean, no, but I understand why Carlos wants them here. It protects both of us, I guess. Both of them. How does it protect her? Well, Emma explains hesitantly, if Carlos says something inappropriate, there are witnesses. But also, if there's ever any question about what was discussed or agreed upon, we have neutral parties who heard everything. She's right. The witness system protects everyone from misunderstandings and false accusations. But at what cost? These people are spending extra money and time just to have normal workplace conversations. The level of paranoia and mistrust is staggering. Leave that evening deeply troubled. The policies I implemented were supposed to create a safer workplace for women. Instead, I've created an environment where basic professional interactions require surveillance. Spend the weekend really thinking about this. Review all our harassment cases from the past year. 3 formal complaints, 2 informal concerns, 1 investigation that was dropped, 6 total cases in a workforce of 200 people. 4 of them involved genuine misunderstandings rather than intentional misconduct. Only 2 cases involved potentially problematic behavior, and those 2 were handled appropriately under our old policies anyway. Meanwhile, office culture has been completely transformed. Men are afraid to interact normally with female colleagues. Women are inadvertently participating in this climate of suspicion. Productivity and collaboration have suffered. Consider whether the cure has become worse than the disease. Monday morning, decide to test something. Schedule one-on-one meetings with several male managers. Don't mention anything about witnesses or recordings. Just send normal meeting invites. Results are exactly what I expected. Every single man requests additional attendees. Thomas from sales wants his female assistant present. Michael from engineering asks to include a woman from his team. Robert from customer service insists on bringing his female deputy manager. When I push back and say this is just between us, the reactions are telling. Thomas gets visibly nervous and asks if the meeting is disciplinary in nature. Michael requests to bring a union representative. Robert asks if he should contact legal counsel. They literally think I'm trying to trap them. These are routine management discussions, not disciplinary actions. But they're so paranoid that any private meeting with an HR representative feels threatening. Finally, understand the full scope of what I've created, an atmosphere of such fear and mistrust that normal business operations have broken down. Male employees now view every interaction with female colleagues as a potential threat to their careers. The irony is crushing. In trying to protect women from harassment, I've made it impossible for men and women to work together. Naturally, collaboration has been replaced by documentation. Trust has been replaced by surveillance. Normal professional relationships have been replaced by paranoid formality. Realize that several good male employees have left the company over the past year. Exit interviews cited cultural fit issues and workplace stress. Probably couldn't say directly that they were afraid of false accusations. Meanwhile, some female employees have started expressing frustration too. They feel like their male colleagues are treating them like walking lawsuits. Conversations are stilted. Collaborations are awkward. Instead of feeling more respected, they feel more isolated. The unintended consequences extend beyond just fear of false accusations. Men are now overcorrecting to avoid any possibility of misunderstanding. They're excluding women from informal networking opportunities, avoiding mentorship relationships that could advance women's careers, declining to offer developmental feedback that might be misconstrued by making harassment accusations so consequential. I've incentivized men to simply avoid working closely with women at all. This is the exact opposite of what I wanted to achieve. Spend several sleepless nights grappling with this realization. Everything I thought I was fighting against, exclusion, inequality, hostile work environments, has gotten worse under my policies. The men aren't malicious. They're not trying to punish women or maintain some patriarchal system. They're genuinely terrified of being falsely accused and having their careers destroyed. And their fear is rational given the system I created. Any accusation triggers immediate investigation and reputation damage. There's no mechanism for quickly resolving misunderstandings. Even false accusations leave permanent marks on employment records. Begin to understand why they insist on witnesses and documentation. It's not paranoid behavior. It's logical self-protection in an environment where their livelihoods depend on being able to prove their innocence. The recording devices, the email documentation, the third-party witnesses, all of it makes perfect sense when viewed from their perspective. They're protecting themselves the only way they can, under policies that assume guilt until proven innocent. Also realize that my initial dismissal of their concerns was part of the problem. When men tried to explain their anxiety about false accusations, I labeled it as misogyny. When they requested policy modifications, I saw it as resistance to progress. When they changed their behavior to avoid accusations, I interpreted it as proof that they had something to hide. But they were just trying to survive in a system that offered them no protection. And my refusal to acknowledge their legitimate concerns made everything worse. The most disturbing realization is how this has affected the women in our office. Several have mentioned feeling uncomfortable with the new dynamics. Male colleagues who used to be friendly and collaborative are now formal and distant. Opportunities for mentorship and advancement have decreased. The workplace has become more segregated, not more inclusive. Some women have even started requesting witnesses for their own meetings with male colleagues, not because they fear harassment, but because they want to avoid the possibility of misunderstandings that could hurt someone's career. Everyone is walking on eggshells. The office culture has shifted from one of trust and collaboration to suspicion and self-protection. This isn't the safe, inclusive environment I wanted to create. Consider what changes might address these problems without abandoning protection for actual harassment victims. Maybe preliminary assessments before launching full investigations. Perhaps more discreet initial fact-gathering. Definitely better communication about investigation outcomes. Some way to quickly resolve obvious misunderstandings. But any modifications feel like admitting defeat. Acknowledging that my approach was fundamentally flawed. Accepting that sometimes the cure can be worse than the disease. The hardest part is realizing that my good intentions don't excuse the harmful outcomes. I thought I was fighting injustice, but I created a different kind of injustice. I thought I was empowering women, but I made their professional relationships more difficult. I thought I was holding men accountable, but I made them too afraid to engage authentically. Sit in my office late Thursday evening, watching the building empty out. Notice that people leave quickly now, avoiding the lingering conversations that used to happen. No more impromptu brainstorming sessions or collaborative problem solving. Everyone sticks to official meetings with official witnesses and official documentation. The workplace has become sterile, formal, paranoid. Exactly the opposite of the dynamic, inclusive environment I envisioned. Get an email from David, one of the men who was investigated early in my tenure. He's requesting a formal meeting to discuss project timelines, wants to include his manager and a colleague as witnesses for a routine scheduling conversation. This is David, who was investigated for complimenting a colleague's jacket. 9 months later, he still won't have a normal one-on-one conversation with any woman in the office. His career trajectory has probably been damaged by that investigation, even though he was cleared. Multiply David's experience by every man who's been investigated or seen someone else investigated. The fear spreads beyond just the accused to anyone who witnessed the process. Realize that I've essentially trained an entire workforce to treat workplace interactions like potential legal proceedings. No wonder creativity and collaboration have suffered. The men aren't evil misogynists trying to oppress women. They're just people trying to keep their jobs and support their families. People who learned that any misunderstanding could lead to weeks of investigation, reputation damage, and career consequences. Their paranoid behavior isn't evidence of guilt. It's evidence of trauma from watching colleagues get investigated for innocent comments. It's a rational response to irrational policies. Finally, understand what Alex meant about working under constant threat. Imagine coming to work every day knowing that any conversation could be misinterpreted, any gesture could be seen as inappropriate, any comment could trigger an investigation that destroys your reputation. The psychological toll must be enormous. Constantly monitoring your words and actions, second-guessing every interaction, avoiding normal professional relationships out of fear. And the women aren't benefiting from this environment either. They're being treated like potential landmines rather than colleagues, excluded from informal networks because men are afraid to interact casually, missing out on mentorship opportunities because close working relationships feel too risky. Everyone loses in this system. Men lose their peace of mind and professional relationships. Women lose opportunities for advancement and authentic collaboration. The company loses productivity, creativity, and employee satisfaction. The zero-tolerance approach that seems so righteous now feels destructive. Nuance, context, and human judgment have been eliminated in favor of rigid procedures. But human interactions require human understanding, not algorithmic responses. Spend the next week quietly observing how our policies play out in practice. Watch a male manager struggle to give developmental feedback to a promising female employee. He's so afraid of saying something wrong that his comments are generic and unhelpful. She leaves the meeting frustrated that she didn't get the guidance she needed. See a brilliant male engineer decline to mentor a female junior developer. When asked why, he explains that close mentoring relationships require honest, sometimes difficult conversations. He can't risk those conversations being misinterpreted as inappropriate. Notice that business travel assignments now favor same-gender pairs. Female employees are missing opportunities for client relationships and conference presentations, not because of intentional discrimination, but because mixed-gender travel feels too risky. The segregation is subtle but pervasive. Team compositions, project assignments, mentoring relationships, everything is being influenced by fear of misconduct allegations. Also realize that actual predators might benefit from this climate. When everyone is hypervigilant about false accusations, real problems might get overlooked. The focus on documentation and procedures might miss genuine harassment that's more subtle or psychological. The policies I created were designed to catch obvious misconduct, but workplace harassment is often more complex than clear-cut cases. Meanwhile, I've created an environment where innocent interactions are treated as potential crimes. Thursday afternoon, receive a resignation letter that crystallizes everything. Jason, the guy who was investigated for the misheard comment, is leaving. His letter is professional, but includes a telling line: seeking opportunities in environments that support positive collegial relationships. Jason was completely innocent, fully cleared, and still felt compelled to leave. How many other good employees have we lost to this climate of fear? Realize that I need to take responsibility for these outcomes: my policies, my implementation, my refusal to acknowledge problems, the hostile work environment I created while trying to prevent hostile work environments. The path forward requires admitting that good intentions don't justify harmful results, that protecting potential victims doesn't require destroying potential accused, that justice requires balancing competing interests, not eliminating one side's concerns. Friday morning, draft a memo proposing policy modifications, preliminary assessments before formal investigations, more discreet fact-gathering procedures, better communication about investigation outcomes, clearer guidelines about what constitutes misconduct versus misunderstanding. Know this will be seen as backtracking on important principles, but those principles weren't creating the outcomes I wanted anyway. Sometimes the most principled thing to do is acknowledge when your principles are causing harm. The men in this office aren't the enemy. They're just people trying to do their jobs without destroying their lives. Their fear isn't evidence of guilt. It's evidence of policies that presume guilt. The women aren't benefiting from an environment where their male colleagues are afraid to interact with them. Inclusion means creating space for positive professional relationships, not eliminating relationships altogether. Real progress requires building trust, not institutionalizing suspicion, creating understanding, not mandating surveillance, fostering collaboration, not enforcing segregation. Sit at my desk, looking out at an office where people are afraid to have normal conversations, where routine interactions require witnesses and documentation, where the specter of investigation haunts every professional relationship. This isn't the workplace I wanted to create, but it's the one I did create. And now I have to figure out how to fix it. The irony is that in trying to protect women from being treated unfairly, I made everyone treat each other unfairly. In fighting discrimination, I created a different kind of discrimination. In demanding justice, I created injustice. The male employee's paranoid behavior isn't pathological. It's adaptive. They learn to survive in the environment I created. Their constant documentation and insistence on witnesses is rational self-defense. And I trained them to be this way. Every investigation that proceeded on minimal evidence, every reputation that was damaged before facts were established, every case where the process became the punishment. They watched and learned that accusations alone could destroy careers. So they adapted by making accusations impossible to sustain. Witnesses, recordings, documentation, all designed to prevent he said, she said situations. The system I created incentivized exactly the behavior I'm now criticizing them for. They're just playing by the rules I established. Realize that my own behavior contributed to this dynamic. Every time men raised concerns about false accusations, I dismissed them as defending harassment. Every time they requested policy modifications, I interpreted it as resistance to equality. Every time they tried to explain their perspective, I labeled it as mansplaining or gaslighting. I never listened to their legitimate concerns, never considered that they might have valid points, never acknowledged that policy decisions affect everyone, not just intended beneficiaries. The feminist frameworks I relied on assumed that men's concerns about false accusations were inherently suspect, that any resistance to harassment policies was evidence of complicity in harassment, that men who felt threatened by these policies must have something to hide. But that framework doesn't account for the reality of human psychology. People respond to incentives, even ones. Fear changes behavior in predictable ways. Policies that assume bad faith will create defensive reactions. The men in this office weren't defending harassment when they expressed concerns. They were defending their own survival and professional prospects. Their anxiety wasn't evidence of guilt. It was evidence of vulnerability. My refusal to acknowledge that vulnerability made everything worse. It forced them to protect themselves through increasingly elaborate measures, witnesses, recordings, documentation, all because I wouldn't provide basic procedural protections. Also realize that this dynamic has damaged relationships between male and female colleagues. Women are now inadvertently complicit in a system that makes men afraid of them. Men are treating women like potential threats rather than partners. Everyone is worse off. Trust has been replaced by fear. Collaboration has been replaced by self-protection. Normal human interaction has been replaced by paranoid formality. The workplace culture I created doesn't serve anyone's interests. Not women seeking equality and respect. Not men seeking fair treatment and due process. Not the organization seeking productivity and innovation. Monday morning, decide to take action. Schedule meetings with key stakeholders to discuss policy modifications. Include both male and female employees in these discussions. Actually listen to everyone's concerns instead of dismissing them. The goal isn't to eliminate protections for harassment victims. It's to create a system that protects everyone fairly, that distinguishes between genuine misconduct and innocent misunderstandings, that preserves due process while taking complaints seriously. Know this will require admitting that my previous approach was flawed, that good intentions don't excuse harmful outcomes, that sometimes the cure can be worse than the disease. But that's what leadership requires: acknowledging mistakes and working to fix them. Putting principles into practice in ways that actually achieve intended goals. The men's paranoid behavior was a message I should have heard months ago. Their insistence on witnesses and documentation was feedback about policies that didn't protect them. Their fear was evidence that the system was broken, not that they were guilty. I created this environment through policies that assumed guilt until proven innocent, that made accusations alone sufficient to damage reputations, that provided no protection for people who were falsely accused. Now I need to create something better. A system that takes harassment seriously without destroying innocent people, that protects victims without victimizing the accused, that promotes equality without institutionalizing fear. The male employees' behavior makes perfect sense now. They're not paranoid. They're rational. They're not guilty. They're scared. They're not resisting progress. They're protecting themselves from unjust policies. And their protection mechanisms are actually quite sophisticated. Witnesses prevent he said, she said situations. Documentation creates objective records. Formal procedures ensure transparency. In many ways, they're implementing better practices than our official policies required. They're just doing it out of fear rather than principle. The challenge now is channeling that energy constructively, creating policies that provide the protections they're seeking through informal means, building trust that makes witness required meetings unnecessary. But first, I need to acknowledge the damage my previous approach caused. To the men who were investigated for innocent actions, to the women who lost opportunities because men were afraid to work with them, to the organization that suffered from decreased collaboration and productivity. Real accountability means taking responsibility for outcomes, not just intentions, means admitting when your methods don't achieve your goals, means changing course when evidence shows you're causing harm. The feminist principles I believe in don't require destroying men's careers over misunderstandings. Equality doesn't require eliminating due process. Protecting women doesn't require making men into enemies. A truly inclusive workplace protects everyone's dignity and rights, creates space for positive professional relationships across gender lines, builds trust rather than institutionalizing suspicion. That's the environment I should have been working toward all along, instead of the paranoid surveillance state I accidentally created, where routine conversations require witnesses and documentation. The men's behavior was a rational adaptation to irrational policies. Their fear was a justified response to unjust procedures. Their protection mechanisms were necessary survival strategies. I taught them that any interaction with female colleagues was dangerous, that accusations alone could destroy careers, that the process of investigation was itself punishment. They learned those lessons well and adapted accordingly, creating elaborate systems to protect themselves from the system I created. Now I understand why they schedule witnesses for every meeting, why they document every conversation, why they refuse one-on-one interactions. It's not because they're guilty of anything. It's because they're afraid of everything. Afraid of me, afraid of the policies I implemented, afraid of the environment I created. And that fear is entirely justified because I did create a system where innocent people could have their careers destroyed, where misunderstandings could be treated as misconduct, where the accused had no protection until after the damage was done. The solution isn't to blame them for adapting to survive. It's to create better policies that don't require such elaborate self-protection, to build trust that makes witness-required meetings unnecessary. But that will take time and genuine acknowledgement of the harm my previous approach caused and a commitment to doing better going forward. The male employees taught me something important through their paranoid behavior. They showed me the real-world consequences of policies I thought were purely theoretical. They demonstrated how good intentions can create terrible outcomes. Their insistence on witnesses and documentation was feedback I should have heeded earlier. Evidence that the system was broken and needed fixing. A warning that I was creating the very problems I thought I was solving. Now I have to figure out how to rebuild trust. How to create policies that protect everyone fairly. How to foster the collaborative, inclusive environment I originally wanted. That starts with admitting that my previous approach was wrong, that the men's concerns were legitimate, that their protective behaviors were rational responses to irrational policies. And it means working with them, not against them, to create something better. Policies that serve everyone's interests, procedures that distinguish between genuine problems and innocent mistakes. An environment where people don't need witnesses to have normal conversations. The paranoid office culture I created serves no one. Not the women it was supposed to protect, not the men it ended up terrorizing, not the organization trying to function effectively. Time to build something better based on trust instead of fear, collaboration instead of self-protection, human understanding instead of algorithmic procedures. That's what real progress looks like. Not the surveillance state I accidentally created where everyone is afraid of everyone else, and normal professional relationships require witnesses and documentation. If this confession kept you hooked, make sure to subscribe, like, and share. We share powerful true stories every day that explore the complex realities of life.